I smiled politely and thanked Victoria for the expensive dark roast coffee as my hands turned entirely ice cold. 7 years of my life, $7,800,000 in fresh enterprise business, and 300,000 lines of custom proprietary code. Yet they were stripping it all away during a brief 20-minute morning meeting with a rehearsed corporate speech about executive leadership that felt like a punch to the throat. We deeply appreciate the foundational work you have established here, Grant, Victoria Sinclair said, her tone dripping with synthetic executive empathy. This transition is not a reflection of your technical execution. Justin simply possesses the broader corporate leadership background we require for our expansion phase. Justin, the same Justin Prescott who had joined Nexus Enterprise Tech barely 8 months ago. The same Justin who was the nephew of our lead investor and had spent his first 3 months asking my senior engineers how to export basic analytics to a spreadsheet. I maintained steady eye contact, nodded calmly, and took a slow sip of coffee while mentally calculating every security protocol and software copyright registration I held in my legal vault. Of course, Victoria, I said, keeping my voice entirely neutral. I understand the executive board's strategic decision completely. I did not let a single tear drop until I reached the quiet solitude of my parked vehicle on the 5th floor of the corporate parking garage. My name is Grant Vance. I am 49 years old, and that coffee meeting took place exactly 7 months ago. I joined Nexus Enterprise Tech as its 6th employee, back when our entire operation occupied a converted warehouse with squeaky floorboards. I was 42 years old back then, coming off a grueling restructuring at a regional software conglomerate, and determined to build an enterprise division that valued technical mastery. Carlton Jennings, our founder, had stood on that dusty warehouse floor 7 years ago, looked me in the eyes, and promised me genuine equity, strategic autonomy, and unconditional respect. For 5 solid years, that founding promise was honored to the letter. I engineered our enterprise acquisition framework from scratch, built our account onboarding pipeline, and wrote the core architecture securing our first 4 Fortune 500 accounts. My division expanded from just me at a folding table to 18 software architects and client strategists spanning 4 dedicated departments. Then Nexus Enterprise Tech secured its Series C funding round, bringing $40 million of fresh institutional investor capital directly into our bank accounts. Overnight, our scrappy engineering culture was completely eradicated. We leased a sleek glass tower downtown, installed polished marble flooring, hung absurd motivational posters, and brought in Victoria Sinclair as Senior Vice President of Client Strategy. Victoria arrived with an expensive designer wardrobe, a Harvard Master of Business Administration degree, and a condescending smile that telegraphed her disdain for technical personnel. She shook my hand on her first morning and told me how impressed she was with the quaint little baseline I had put together. The corporate subtext was razor sharp. My 7 years of labor were dismissed as cute foundational effort, and now real corporate executives were stepping in to govern. Within 90 days, Victoria restructured my entire organizational chart. She introduced endless administrative portals, mandatory daily time logs, and complex tracking utilities that added zero value to client deliverables. None of the custom automation scripts I built were acknowledged. Every major milestone achieved was reframed by her as a modest baseline requiring her executive refinement. Yet I adapted silently. I worked 14-hour days, mastered her compliance software, and smiled through quarterly reviews where she criticized my communication style. What Victoria never grasped was that enterprise client relationships are built on personal trust, operational reliability, and deep domain expertise rather than corporate slide decks. I knew these client chief technology officers on a first-name basis. I had stayed up with their engineering teams at 2 in the morning, resolving critical server outages. That personal credibility was precisely how I closed the Drake Logistics enterprise portfolio. 5 major logistics corporations, representing a combined strategic contract of $7,800,000 over 4 years. They signed with Nexus Enterprise Tech because they trusted me personally to architect their digital ecosystem. When I finalized those contracts, Carlton Jennings popped expensive champagne in the executive boardroom. Victoria gave a glowing public toast, framing the victory as a testament to her new methodology, despite not attending a single technical discovery session. 3 weeks later, she summoned me into her corner glass office for that quiet demotion coffee. There is a unique degradation in being demoted immediately after delivering your company's greatest financial victory. It is not merely the loss of executive title, it is the public declaration that management views your life's labor as disposable. That following Monday morning, reporting to Justin Prescott was an excruciating experience. Justin scheduled a 3-hour handoff session where he asked me to explain the foundational logic of our enterprise pipelines. He scribbled hasty notes in an expensive leather journal, nodding intently like he was absorbing high-level corporate secrets. "Grant, your institutional memory is remarkably useful," Justin remarked, leaning back in his executive chair. "Victoria believes that with your behind-the-scenes operational support, I can truly elevate this division to corporate standards." I smiled calmly, promising to provide whatever assistance he required while mentally reviewing every asset in my private legal repository. As I walked back to my desk, I realized that true professional leverage is never granted by corporate titles. It is earned through undeniable technical mastery and total ownership of your proprietary intellectual property. That night, I did not sleep a single minute. I lay awake beside my wife, Elena Vance, who was 47 years old, staring at the ceiling fan while recounting the 7 years of relentless labor I had poured into Nexus Enterprise Tech. Elena and I had been married for 22 years. She had supported me through endless late nights, missed weekend anniversaries, and grueling travel schedules to watch Carlton Jennings ignore my phone calls and allow Victoria to hand my enterprise division to an incompetent investor's relative was a cold, decisive awakening. At 3:17 in the morning, I sat down at my home office desk, opened my personal laptop, and officially incorporated Vance Apex Advisory. I was not acting out of reckless emotion or impulsive anger. I was 49 years old, with decades of high-level enterprise experience, and I understood the legal boundary lines with surgical precision. Before signing my initial employment contract 7 years prior, I had insisted on a critical intellectual property exclusion clause under Section 106 of Title 17 of the United States Code. All custom software frameworks, analytical algorithms, and diagnostic integration scripts developed on my personal hardware prior to my employment remained my exclusive intellectual property. I had formally registered the copyrights with the United States Copyright Office 4 years ago. Nexus Enterprise Tech had been utilizing my proprietary framework under an explicit revocable internal usage license, not an absolute assignment of corporate ownership. Furthermore, I had signed a standard corporate non-solicitation agreement. I knew that directly contacting Nexus clients would give Victoria's corporate attorneys immediate grounds to file an emergency legal injunction against me. So I established a strict operational rule. I would build my independent infrastructure, secure all legal licenses, and never reach out to a single client on the Nexus corporate roster. If clients decided to seek alternative advisory services on their own independent initiative, that was their absolute legal right under commercial law. Over the next 3 weeks, I played the part of the dutiful, demoted senior employee flawlessly. I walked Justin Prescott through every basic workflow, answered his superficial questions during morning check-ins, and organized his client presentation folders. Outside the office, however, I was operating on complete overdrive. I built a clean, secure enterprise website for Vance Apex Advisory, established corporate banking accounts, and retained a seasoned employment attorney who verified that broad non-compete covenants were completely void and unenforceable under state business and professions code. Section 16,600. The operational cracks in Victoria's enterprise strategy began appearing far sooner than anyone in executive management anticipated. Justin Prescott simply lacked the technical competence to manage complex multi-million-dollar enterprise architectures. The first major warning sign arrived on a Thursday afternoon via a direct phone call from Preston Drake, the chief executive officer of Drake Logistics. "Grant, Preston said, his voice clipped and visibly frustrated over the phone line. I just finished a 2-hour strategic alignment call with Justin and Victoria. I maintained strict professional composure. Is everything proceeding smoothly with your platform integration, Preston? Smoothly? Preston scoffed loudly. Justin spent 45 minutes presenting generic corporate slide decks that had nothing to do with our core logistics database architecture. When my senior systems architect asked him about API latency and data throughput, Justin stared at him blankly and said he would circle back after checking with his internal team. Preston paused, his tone shifting into serious concern. Grant, why were you muted on that entire call? Why is Justin leading our enterprise account when you personally architected our system? I chose my words with extreme legal precision, adhering strictly to my non-solicitation covenants. Preston, the executive board has reorganized our client services department to align with their new governance model. Justin is the designated executive account lead. There was a long, heavy silence on the line. Preston was a seasoned chief executive who had built a multi-million-dollar logistics enterprise from scratch. He understood corporate doublespeak instantly. Are you telling me management pushed you aside after you closed our enterprise contract? Preston asked directly. I am evaluating my professional options for the future, Preston. That is all I can ethically and legally share at this moment. Understood, Preston replied firmly. Let us grab dinner next Tuesday at a quiet establishment outside the city. Just two longtime colleagues having a private conversation. That dinner with Preston Drake marked the quiet turning point of the entire corporate war. Preston did not offer to terminate his contract with Nexus Enterprise Tech immediately, as that would have created unnecessary contractual friction for his own firm. Instead, he informed me that 3 major logistics technology firms in his private network were actively seeking high-level enterprise architecture consulting. They are far too sophisticated for traditional marketing agencies and too nimble for bureaucratic conglomerates, Preston explained over dinner. They need an executive with your exact architectural track record to design their core enterprise systems before they scale up operations. I thanked Preston warmly. Within 30 days, Vance Apex Advisory had secured 3 independent enterprise clients on lucrative night and weekend retainers. My daily routine became grueling beyond belief. From 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon, I sat in my demoted cubicle at Nexus, quietly assisting Justin from 6 in the evening. Until 2 in the morning, I worked in my home office, engineering enterprise frameworks for my own rapidly growing client list. I slept barely 4 hours a night. Elena brought me warm coffee, managed our household affairs, and constantly reminded me why we were fighting this battle for independence. By the end of the 3rd month, Vance Apex Advisory was generating $45,000 in monthly recurring revenue, while my independent advisory firm was rapidly expanding. Conditions inside Nexus Enterprise Tech were collapsing into complete operational chaos. Justin Prescott's complete lack of technical foundation was actively destroying client confidence across every major enterprise account. Victoria Sinclair responded to the mounting corporate friction not by addressing Justin's incompetence, but by implementing even heavier administrative burdens on the engineering staff. She mandated daily 8 in the morning check-in sessions, where every team member was required to account for their work in strict 15-minute increments. She replaced our streamlined custom integration protocols with a bloated third-party software platform that tripled administrative overhead while slowing system data processing by 40%. 2 of my former senior software engineers resigned in deep frustration within 3 weeks of the changes. Rather than listening to legitimate team feedback, Victoria announced a sweeping corporate fee restructuring, hiking client retainer prices by 22% across the board to fund her strategic expansion plan. The official results of the 2nd quarter client satisfaction audits were absolute catastrophe. Overall enterprise client satisfaction plummeted by 48%, technical SLA compliance dropped by 45%, and executive responsiveness ratings crashed by 62%. Victoria called an emergency department meeting in the main glass executive conference room. For 45 minutes, she paced back and forth across the room, berating the engineering team for failing to embody true corporate excellence. Then, without a hint of self-awareness, she turned to the front of the room, looked directly at me, and said, "We must immediately return to the rigorous technical standards that Grant's division maintained prior to our strategic expansion." Sitting in that room, watching the woman who had stripped my executive position and handed my life's labor to an unqualified relative now demand that I fix her operational disaster, something deep inside me crystallized. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply waited for the meeting to adjourn, walked back to my desk, and drafted my formal letter of resignation. That Saturday morning, I scheduled a private meeting with Carlton Jennings at a quiet diner 20 miles away from corporate headquarters. Carlton looked noticeably older, weathered, and exhausted. The energetic founder who had once built Nexus in a disty warehouse had been completely consumed by corporate investor boards. "Carlton," I said calmly, sliding a sealed white envelope across the dining table, "I am giving you my official 2-week notice. My last day at Nexus Enterprise Tech will be the 15th of this month." Carlton froze, setting his coffee cup down with a visibly trembling hand. "Grant, please tell me this is negotiable," Carlton pleaded. "We are facing severe client retention issues across the enterprise sector right now." "It is completely non-negotiable, Carlton. When you allowed Victoria to demote me and transfer my enterprise division to Justin, you made a clear corporate choice. You chose short-term political convenience and investor, posturing over technical excellence, integrity, and long-term loyalty." Carlton sighed heavily, rubbing his temples in deep anguish. "I fought against it in the boardroom, Grant. But Victoria had the complete backing of our primary institutional investors. They wanted traditional corporate credentials at the helm." "I appreciate your candor, Carlton," I replied evenly. "But my decision is absolute. I have built an independent advisory practice, and I am dedicating my full professional energy to its expansion." Carlton looked at me with profound regret. "Are you taking any of our corporate clients with you?" "I have honored every single clause of my employment agreement," I stated firmly. "I have not solicited a single client on the Nexus corporate roster." The following Monday morning, I walked into Victoria Sinclair's corner office and handed her my written resignation. The reaction on Victoria's face was instantaneous. For 3 full seconds, her polished corporate demeanor completely shattered, revealing raw, unadulterated panic. She had assumed I would remain indefinitely as Justin's quiet background engine, performing all the complex architectural work while Justin collected the executive title and inflated salary. "This decision is remarkably unprofessional, Grant," Victoria said, attempting to recover her sharp corporate tone while scanning my letter. "I assume you are leaving to join a competing enterprise agency?" "I am leaving to manage my own independent advisory firm, Vance Apex Advisory," I answered smoothly. Victoria's eyes narrowed into sharp slits. "Your employment contract contains comprehensive non-compete and non-solicitation covenants. If you attempt to touch our client accounts, our legal team will destroy you in court. I am fully aware of my legal and contractual obligations, Victoria. My employment attorney has reviewed every single document. I suggest you have your corporate legal counsel, Sesti, do the exact same." Victoria immediately picked up her desk phone. "HR will escort you from the building immediately. Your access privileges are revoked as of this moment." Within 30 minutes, a junior human resources representative escorted me out of the building, carrying a small cardboard box containing my personal framed family photo and desk coffee mug. My corporate laptop had been wiped remotely before I even left her office, and my security keycard was deactivated while I stood waiting at the elevator bank. Victoria immediately issued a company-wide email declaring that I had departed to pursue personal endeavors and that she was personally assuming direct executive oversight of all enterprise client accounts. Her desperate attempt to control the corporate narrative backfired immediately. Within 48 hours of my departure, my personal phone was flooded with direct calls and messages from enterprise clients who had seen the company-wide announcement and recognized the severe corporate panic behind it. The corporate fallout from my sudden departure erupted far faster, and with much greater destructive force than Victoria Sinclair or Carlton Jennings ever anticipated. Enterprise clients who had tolerated Justin Prescott's technical incompetence solely because I was present behind the scenes were deeply outraged by Victoria's abrupt corporate announcement. Preston Drake was the very first enterprise client to take decisive legal and contractual action against the company. 5 days after my departure, Drake Logistics formally notified Nexus Enterprise Tech that they were exercising their 90-day contract termination clause. They cited systemic failure to meet technical service level agreements, unauthorized retainer price increases of 22%, and total breach of executive trust. Two other major enterprise accounts, TechCorp Systems and Vanguard Freight, followed suit within 10 days, formally refusing to renew their annual multi-million-dollar service agreements. Victoria Sinclair panicked completely. Rather than examining her own failed management and arrogant oversight, she instructed Nexus corporate attorneys to launch an aggressive legal intimidation campaign against me. On a Friday afternoon, a formal process server delivered a legal cease and desist notice directly to my home address. The letter falsely alleged that I was engaging in unlawful solicitation of Nexus Enterprise clients, misusing proprietary trade secrets, and violating my corporate non-compete covenant. They demanded that I immediately cease all advisory operations, hand over my entire private client roster for corporate inspection, and pay substantial liquidated damages. I immediately forwarded the legal document to my employment attorney, who reviewed the frivolous claims with a confident, knowing smile. "Grant, this letter is pure corporate theater designed to intimidate you," my attorney explained calmly. "First, under California Business and Professions Code Section 16,600, broad non-compete covenants are completely void as a matter of public policy in this jurisdiction. Second, you have documented, time-stamped email proof that every single client who contacted you did so entirely on their own unprompted initiative. Third, and most importantly, they are claiming you stole their proprietary software platform code when the legal rights belong entirely to you." My attorney drafted a legally devastating response that shifted the entire corporate battle line instantly. Our legal counter notice formally notified Nexus Enterprise Tech that all core enterprise code utilized in their system was created by me prior to my employment and formally registered with the United States Copyright Office under Section 106 of Title 17 of the Code. We informed them that their internal usage license was revoked due to material breach of contract and failure to pay proper intellectual property licensing royalties following my demotion. Furthermore, we explicitly stated that under Delaware General Corporation law principles, Victoria and the Executive Board had committed a severe breach of fiduciary duty by misrepresenting technical platform stability and client retention metrics to institutional investors. We explicitly stated that if Nexus pursued litigation, formal legal discovery would mandate the full subpoena of all internal board emails, Victoria's private communications regarding my demotion, and internal financial records concerning investor misrepresentations. We gave their executive board 72 hours to withdraw their legal demands or face an immediate federal copyright injunction that would freeze their entire software platform operations nationwide. The legal result was immediate and absolute. Within 48 hours, Nexus Enterprise Tech's outside legal counsel sent a formal written retraction, stating they would not pursue any legal action against Vance Apex Advisory. They were terrified of federal legal discovery exposing their internal misrepresentations and completely incapable of functioning if my software license was frozen. With the corporate legal threat permanently crushed, Vance Apex Advisory accelerated its growth trajectory at an incredible rate. I hired 4 senior software architects who had recently resigned from Nexus, leased a full executive floor in an office building downtown, and expanded our enterprise service offerings across 3 major sectors. By the 5th month of operating independently, Vance Apex Advisory was managing 12 enterprise accounts and generating $180,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Meanwhile, Nexus Enterprise Tech entered a catastrophic tailspin of organizational and operational failure. Without my software framework updates and technical oversight, Justin Prescott accidentally corrupted a major client relational database during a routine server migration, causing a 14-hour total system outage for TechCorp systems. The executive board was forced to issue a formal public apology and write off $600,000 in service credits. News of the massive technical failure spread rapidly throughout the regional enterprise technology community. Nexus stock valuation plummeted by 28% in a single financial quarter as institutional investors began rapidly offloading their shares on the open market. Carlton Jennings was stripped of his operational authority by the board and relegated to an empty chairman title, while Victoria Sinclair found herself under intense scrutiny from the corporate audit committee. Then, 6 months after my quiet demotion, I received a private dinner invitation from Carlton Jennings. I accepted the dinner meeting, only to observe how corporate hubris crumbles when confronted by undeniable market realities. We met at an upscale private dining club. Downtown, far removed from the tech district, Carlton Jennings looked like a completely broken man. The expensive corporate suit he wore hung loosely on his diminished frame, and the executive confidence that had once defined his leadership was entirely gone. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me, Grant," Carlton said softly after the waiter poured sparkling water. "Our enterprise division is in complete, unmitigated collapse. We have lost 7 major enterprise clients in the last 60 days alone, and 3 more have issued formal notices of default." I maintained a quiet, measured, and professional demeanor. "That is deeply unfortunate, Carlton. Systemic technical execution requires genuine domain competence rather than superficial management." Carlton set his silver fork down and looked at me with open desperation in his eyes. "The board held an emergency meeting yesterday afternoon. They authorized me to make you a complete corporate acquisition offer. Nexus Enterprise Tech wants to acquire Vance Apex Advisory. We will offer you full operational autonomy, an executive seat on the board of directors, and $3 million in liquid cash plus equity. Furthermore, Victoria Sinclair has been officially terminated from her position, and Justin Prescott is being reassigned to an entry-level administrative role in another regional branch." I sat back in my leather chair, looking at the founder who had once promised me respect 7 years ago before handing my life's labor to corporate politicians. 6 months ago, such a sweeping corporate offer would have felt like the ultimate professional vindication. Now, sitting across from him as the sole owner of a thriving debt-free enterprise advisory firm, the proposal felt completely hollow and irrelevant. "Carlton," I said gently but firmly, "I am declining your acquisition offer completely." Carlton stared at me in absolute disbelief. "Grant, you would be returning as Chief Technology Officer with total corporate control over the entire division. You are not offering me executive leadership because you suddenly value my architectural vision, Carlton. You are offering it because you are terrified of competing against me in the open market. You allowed Victoria to humiliate me, stripped my enterprise division, and ignored my 7 years of loyalty until your own balance sheet started bleeding profusely. I have built an independent firm that operates with absolute integrity, technical excellence, and true client trust. I will never place my work under your board's control again." Carlton lowered his head in silence, unable to meet my eyes. He knew every word I spoke was the absolute truth. 3 weeks after that dinner meeting, the final glorious chapter of this professional journey unfolded. My office phone rang, and my executive assistant connected me with Sandra Holcomb, an executive managing partner at the Drake Logistics Investment Group. Sandra represented a major consortium of institutional technology funds managing over $200 million in enterprise capital. "Grant," Sandra said warmly over the line. "Preston Drake suggested I contact you directly regarding our strategic portfolio initiative. Our investment group is establishing a centralized enterprise technology architecture group to oversee core digital systems across all 16 of our portfolio tech companies. We are seeking an executive leader with proven technical authority to build and lead this entire overarching infrastructure." I listened intently as Sandra outlined their comprehensive acquisition proposal. They were not offering a standard employment contract. They were proposing a full corporate acquisition of Vance Apex Advisory for $14,500,000 in cash, while retaining our entire engineering team and brand identity. I would serve as managing partner of the new enterprise technology group, receiving substantial equity stakes across all 16 portfolio companies and a permanent seat on the executive advisory board. The strategic irony was absolute and profound. The very enterprise portfolio that Victoria Sinclair had tried to strip from me had ultimately led to an enterprise deal worth $14,500,000. I signed the final acquisition documents yesterday afternoon in a high-rise conference room overlooking the city skyline. At 49 years old, I achieved total, permanent financial independence, securing my family's financial future for generations while doing the work I loved on my own independent terms. This morning, I noticed a new LinkedIn connection request from Victoria Sinclair. Her executive profile had been updated to show she was actively seeking new corporate advisory opportunities following her termination from Nexus Enterprise Tech. I left the request pending. I may never accept it. People often ask me if I feel intense bitterness toward Victoria or Carlton for how they treated me. The truth is I feel nothing but immense gratitude for that fateful coffee meeting 7 months ago. If Victoria had not demoted me, I might still be sitting in that corporate cubicle working 14-hour days to build someone else's dream while taking corporate breadcrumbs. Her arrogance forced me to recognize my own true value, claim my intellectual property, and step into absolute executive independence. So here is to Victoria Sinclair and the executive board of Nexus Enterprise Tech. Thank you for the cold coffee, the corporate demotion, and the unintentional push that launched the single greatest chapter of my professional life. Sometimes, being demoted by corporate politicians is the exact promotion you never knew you needed to claim your true executive destiny.